The small suitcase beside me seemed to mock me. There, standing at the grand entrance of the Grandview Resort and Spa, I watched my son David's car disappear around the bend in the road. It was a bright afternoon, too bright, really. A kind of sun that usually makes you feel warm and hopeful. But all I felt was an unyielding coldness spreading through me, like an icy hand, slowly, deliberately grasping my chest. The Grandview. It looked so utterly grand, just like its name suggested. Lush, perfectly manicured green lawns stretched out on either side. Sparkling fountains danced with light, and people, so many people, walked in and out, their faces relaxed, their voices light with laughter, carrying their own suitcases, looking like they belonged. And there I was, Eleanor Davies, 72 years old, with my worn, small suitcase, standing awkwardly on the sidewalk, feeling utterly misplaced, like a package delivered to the wrong address. My son, David, my only son, my pride and joy. I watched it shrink, a tiny speck against the vastness of the road, then finally, irrevocably, vanish. Just like that. One moment, they were waving, their faces turning away, and the next, only the faint, distant hum of the engine lingered in the air. A cruel, mocking whisper of their departure. It felt like a vital part of my very soul was being pulled away, too, getting smaller and smaller, until it was utterly, completely gone, leaving only a hollow void. The money. Oh, the money. $80,000. Every single penny of it. It came from the sale of my house, my cherished home. The house Arthur, my late husband, and I built together, brick by painstaking brick, filled with a lifetime of memories. The very house where David grew up, where we celebrated Christmases and birthdays, where joy had once filled every corner. It was all I had left in the world, really, besides my modest pension. They told me, with such earnest faces, that this money was for their dream trip. And the promise? The unwavering promise that when they came back, we'd all live together. A new modern place, they said. Safer. Better. More practical for an old woman like me. I had allowed myself to imagine those cozy evenings, the warmth of family meals, the sound of laughter filling new, bright rooms. I pictured myself reading bedtime stories to my granddaughter, watching her grow up right there beside me every single day. That promise had been my comfort, my security, my future, my whole world for the past 6 months, ever since we started talking about selling the house. But now, the car was gone. And the hotel door, that grand, welcoming entrance that was supposed to be my temporary new home, remained stubbornly, coldly closed. It didn't open for me. Not yet, anyway. My heart, which had just moments ago been overflowing with that naive love and all those hopeful expectations, felt like it was swiftly turning into a solid block of ice. My stomach churned with a growing, nauseating dread. I took a shaky breath, clutching the thin, worn handle of my little suitcase. It felt so incredibly light, almost empty. Just a few clothes, a small wash bag, some personal trinkets. Everything else, all the countless memories, all the tangible pieces of my long life, gone. Donated, or so they had assured me. I walked slowly, each step feeling heavy, towards the imposing glass doors, pushing one open with a trembling hand. The cool, almost sterile air of the lobby hit me then, a stark, unwelcome contrast to the burning sun outside. The air smelled faintly of expensive, exotic flowers and something else, something I couldn't quite place, but it felt overwhelmingly luxurious, utterly out of my world, completely out of my reach. I approached the polished front desk, my reflection shimmering back at me from the dark wood. A young woman, with a polite, almost overly kind smile, looked up. "Welcome to the Grandview," she chirped. She typed on her computer, her fingers moving quickly, efficiently, a blur of motion. Her smile, however, slowly, subtly faded. She typed again, this time more slowly, deliberately. Then she looked up, her eyes softening with a pity I instantly recognized, a pity I couldn't bear to face. "I'm so very sorry, ma'am," she said, her voice gentle. "But there's no reservation here under the name Eleanor Davies. No reservation." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, thick with unspoken meaning. My mind raced, trying desperately to make sense of the absurdity, the impossible situation. "But he said it was all arranged. He just left me here," I stammered, my voice rising a little, betraying the panic that was now starting to bubble up inside me. The humiliation began to spread, a hot, angry flush creeping up my neck, across my cheeks, burning fiercely. It was a deeper, more searing heat than the afternoon sun. A public, silent rejection. I felt exposed, vulnerable. The one David had handed me with such a hasty, almost apologetic smile just before he got into the car. I fumbled in my handbag, my fingers clumsy with nerves, and pulled it out. It was thin, far too thin for a hotel voucher or any official document. I tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside, there were just a few crumpled dollars. Not even enough for a single night at a place like this, I was certain. And a small folded note, my name, Eleanor, scribbled quickly across the top. Below it, just 3 words, "We'll talk later." So casual, so dismissive, so final. My son, my own son. They didn't go to Europe. They wouldn't have left me like this, stranded and alone, if they were really going to Europe. The crushing, undeniable truth dawned on me then, a painful realization that stole my breath, leaving me gasping for air in that grand, indifferent lobby. They went to a new life, a life where I wasn't included. My $80,000, my home, my past, my entire future, all of it gone, handed over, and I was just left here, left out, discarded, a burden, a problem to be solved. There I stood, utterly abandoned, on the cold, polished marble floor of that grand lobby. The quiet murmurs of other guests swirling around me, sounding like a distant, uncaring hum. And the sound of my daughter-in-law Sarah's laughter. It echoed relentlessly in my memory, a bright, carefree sound that now felt sinister, chilling, utterly mocking. I saw her face in my mind, smiling, eyes sparkling, talking excitedly about their dream trip. It was all a carefully constructed lie, all of it. In that shattering moment, the full, cruel extent of the trap they had set. and like an old piece of furniture they no longer had any use for. The tears, they burned fiercely behind my eyes, hot and insistent, threatening to spill over, but I wouldn't let them. Not here, not now. A wave of profound, agonizing sadness washed over me, a feeling of absolute emptiness, a bottomless pit in my heart. My world, as I knew it, had just vanished along with David's car, leaving me adrift. But as the sting of their emotional coldness, their shocking distance, tried to completely overwhelm me, something else stirred. Deep within me, an old memory, a faint, almost forgotten whisper from the past, began to flicker. It was a promise, a solemn promise made by my late husband Arthur so many years ago. It felt like an ember, buried deep under years of ash and sorrow, suddenly glowing with a tiny, persistent warmth. He had always been so careful, so wise, so full of foresight. I remembered his words, his steady, loving gaze. He always said he had taken care of me, that there was something more, something I couldn't quite grasp in my current pain, but it was there, waiting, beneath the surface of my raw hurt, a tiny spark of possibility. I just knew it. I had to know what Arthur meant. I had to. That memory, that tiny spark, it was all I had, and I clung to it right there in the overwhelming silence of that luxurious lobby. My name is Eleanor Davies. I'm 72 years old. Not a young woman anymore, not one who runs from trouble, not one who gives up easily. I was a seamstress my entire life, you know. Hours bent over fabric, making beauty from scraps. It taught me patience. It taught me persistence. And after my beloved Arthur passed away almost 10 years ago, my life changed completely. He was my rock, my everything. My life, what was left of it, truly revolved around taking care of our home. Our home. It was huge. Too big for just me, I suppose, but it was filled with every single memory. Every corner held a laugh, a quiet moment, a shared dream. I tended to my rose bushes outside, just like he liked them. And more than anything, I focused on my son David and his family. They were my world, my purpose. My house was more than just walls and a roof. It was my safe haven, the castle Arthur built for us with so much sweat and effort. Every nail, every plank, every fresh coat of paint, it was all him. Our shared effort, our love made solid. But David, my son, he always said the house was too old. He said it was too much work. He'd look at the creaking floors, the tall ceilings, and just sigh. I lived a simple but dignified life. My pension, it was modest, just enough to get by. But the house was mine, fully paid off, a symbol of our victory. Arthur's and mine, a monument to our hard work. Arthur, he was a very intelligent man, and cautious. Oh, so cautious, always thinking ahead. Before he left me, before he passed, he made me sit at our old kitchen table, the one with the chipped paint, where we'd had countless cups of tea. He explained every document to me, every single paper, kept in his old, worn leather briefcase. It was a sturdy thing, dark brown, with a comforting, familiar smell of old leather and paper. He went through each one, slowly, patiently, making sure I understood. "Eleanor," he said, his voice so gentle, so full of love, "take care of what is ours." He paused, his eyes looking deep into mine, making sure I heard him. "But above all, take care of yourself. Our true legacy is right here," and he pointed to that old briefcase. He tapped it with a finger, right there on the table. At the time, my heart was breaking. My mind was full of grief. I didn't give his words much importance, honestly. I just nodded, trying to be strong for him. I knew he was a careful man, so I put the briefcase in the back of the closet, tucked away, thinking they were just old papers, things a man like Arthur would meticulously organize. My focus then was on love, on family, on those beautiful, loud Sunday lunches we used to have, the simple joys, the moments that mattered. Little did I know that by agreeing to sell my home, my precious home, to fund my son David's dreams, those dreams they spun so beautifully, I was ignoring the most important warning I had ever received in my entire life. The innocence of my heart was the weapon they would use against me. But my husband's wisdom, his wisdom, would be my salvation. Everything began to change about 6 months ago. It wasn't a sudden storm, more like a slow, creeping chill that seeped into my bones, a coldness I couldn't quite explain. David, my son, and Sarah, my daughter-in-law, my own family, their visits, which used to be long, easy afternoons filled with chatter and laughter, started getting shorter, much shorter. And the conversations, they changed too. Before, they'd ask about my health, about my aches and pains, or how my rose bushes were blooming. Now, it was different. Their eyes, they just slid past my face, past the roses, straight to the wall. "My house. Mom, this house is a white elephant," David would say, almost casually, as if he were discussing the weather. His voice would have a little edge to it, a subtle impatience I'd never heard before. He'd look around, his gaze lingering on the high ceilings, the creaking floorboards, the slightly faded wallpaper in the living room. Everything that held a lifetime of memories, he saw as a burden. "It's too much for you, Mom. Too much upkeep. Too much worry." He'd shake his head, a sigh escaping his lips, a sigh that sounded like he was carrying my burdens. But I somehow felt like I was the burden. Sarah, she'd always chime in, her voice sweet, almost sugary. But that sweetness, it never quite reached her eyes. They remained practical, calculated. "Sell it, Mom," she'd insist, placing a hand gently on my arm. It felt more like a demand than a comfort. "We'll help you move to a smaller, more practical place. Think of it, Mom. No more leaky roofs, no more worrying about property taxes. Just easy living." And then she'd bring out the big guns. "And with the money, we can take that trip to Europe. Please, Mom, it's your granddaughter's dream. You know how much she talks about Paris and the Eiffel Tower." My granddaughter. Oh, how I loved that girl. Her dreams, they felt like my own. They used that. They knew I'd do anything for her. My heart would ache. I felt that coldness spreading inside me again. The promises were many, They piled them high, a cozy apartment, just a stone's throw from their new place. A life free from worries. It sounded so appealing on the surface, like a soft blanket of security. But with each conversation, I felt less like the cherished mother they loved, and more like a problem. A problem that needed to be solved, neatly, efficiently, and quickly. The pain of that subtle distancing, that gradual shift in their affection, it was constant. A dull, throbbing ache behind my ribs. But I blamed myself. I did. I thought, "Oh, Eleanor, you're being selfish. You're too attached to these old walls, these bricks. You're holding them back. You're not being helpful. You're not being useful." And I wanted so desperately to be useful. I wanted to be helpful. I wanted to be loved. They started rushing me. Seriously rushing me. The calls became more frequent. The urgency in their voices more pronounced. "Mom, we found a buyer. A great offer. We have a unique opportunity for the trip, but we need to move fast." A unique opportunity. It felt like a whirlwind. My head spun. I wanted to prove I wasn't a burden, that I was still capable, still a part of the family. So despite the knot of unease twisting in my stomach, I gave in. I told them yes. I signed the papers. My hand, it trembled slightly as I scrawled my name, Eleanor Davies, across the dotted line. It felt like I was signing away more than just a house. I was signing away my past, my foundation. Then came the day I handed them the transfer confirmation. $80,000. Every single penny from the sale of my history, my memories, my entire life savings, transformed into a number on a screen. David took the paper from my hand, a quick, almost fleeting smile on his face. Not a warm smile, not a grateful smile. It was more like a sigh of relief, a burden lifted from them. Sarah, she just nodded, a tight, polite gesture. No hug, no real words of thanks. Just that quick, almost dismissive look. Like an item checked off a list. At that moment, in my naive heart, I still believed. I truly did. I believed I was investing in my family's future, their happiness, my granddaughter's dream trip to Europe. I pictured them sending me postcards from Paris, from Rome. I imagined the stories they'd tell, the happy memories we'd make when they returned. I had no idea, not one single inkling, that I was, in fact, financing my own solitude, my own abandonment. I was paying for my own isolation. And the truth of that, the stark, brutal reality, was still waiting for me, just around the corner. I just didn't know it yet. I was so blind, so utterly, tragically blind. The last thing I remembered, before everything changed, was believing I was investing in their future, my family's future, my granddaughter's dream. I was so blind, so utterly, tragically blind. The day of the move arrived. It wasn't a move, not really. Not in the way I understood moves. There were no packing boxes, no familiar furniture being carefully wrapped, no last-minute trips to the hardware store. It was just an end. David and Sarah came to pick me up in their car. It was sleek, dark, and felt so impersonal compared to our old station wagon. My things, my lifetime of belongings, they were already gone. Donated, they said, or thrown away. They wouldn't fit in the new place, Mom. Sarah had chirped, her voice light, dismissive of every book, every photo album, every piece of fabric I had ever held dear. So I had only one small suitcase with me. It felt almost empty, holding just a few changes of clothes, my most essential toiletries, and a small, worn photograph of Arthur and me on our wedding day. That was all I was allowed to keep. We drove for a while, away from the familiar streets, away from everything I knew. I tried to make conversation, to ask about the new place, but their answers were vague, their eyes darting to the rearview mirror, or fixed straight ahead. A sense of unease, cold and persistent, began to coil in my stomach. Then, David turned the car, and we pulled up to the entrance of the Grandview Resort and Spa. It was a beautiful place, grand and imposing, surrounded by lush, perfectly manicured gardens. Fountains sparkled in the afternoon sun, and people in expensive clothes walked by, laughing. It looked like a dream, a place you'd see in a travel magazine, utterly out of my world. "You'll stay here for a few days, Mom," David said, his voice a little too quick, a little too loud, as he stopped the car right at the curb. He didn't look at me. His gaze was fixed somewhere beyond my shoulder, on the grand facade of the hotel. "It's more comfortable here, much nicer than a dusty apartment building. We'll arrange your permanent apartment while we're away." Away. The word. Away where? Away from me? He leaned over and gave me a hurried kiss on the forehead. It was quick, perfunctory, barely a brush of his lips. Sarah didn't even get out of the car. She just gave a small wave from the passenger seat, her face unreadable behind the tinted window. And then he was gone. He just left me there, on the sidewalk, with my small suitcase beside the polished marble columns. "The reservation is in your name, Mom," he called out, his voice already fading as he pulled away. "I'll call you from the airport." I watched the car drive away, slowly at first, then picking up speed, shrinking into the distance. My heart, which had been clinging to a fragile thread of hope, felt a chill spread through it, a coldness that seeped into my very bones. Airport, Europe. The words sounded hollow now. They rang false, a lie whispered by the wind as his car disappeared around the bend, leaving me utterly alone on that grand, indifferent curb. I took a deep, shaky breath. The expensive floral scent of the hotel's potted plants, doing little to calm the rising panic. Clutching my suitcase, I walked slowly, deliberately, towards the imposing glass doors. Each step felt heavy, like I was dragging myself through thick mud. I pushed open the door and stepped into the cool, air-conditioned lobby. It was vast, silent, intimidating. I approached the reception desk, my reflection a wavering ghost in the polished surface. A young woman with a kind smile looked up. "Welcome to the Grandview," she said, her voice bright and professional. I managed to stammer my name, Eleanor Davies. "My son, David. He said he made a reservation for me." She typed, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The smile slowly, subtly began to fade from her face. She typed again, slower this time, her brow furrowed slightly. Then she looked up, her eyes wide, filled with a pity that hit me like a physical blow. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," she began, her voice much softer now, almost hesitant. "There's no reservation under the name of Eleanor Davies. No reservation." The world seemed to tilt. My voice came out as a desperate squeak. "But he just left me. He said it was all arranged." I insisted, my voice rising in a frantic plea. She checked again, more thoroughly this time. Her gaze lingered. That's when the manager, a kindly-looking man with salt and pepper hair, came over, his expression grave. He looked at the young woman, then at me. Very carefully, in a quiet, almost hushed voice, he explained, "Ma'am, sometimes this happens. Families, they sometimes bring their elderly relatives here, say they've made arrangements, and then they simply disappear." He didn't say the word abandonment, but it hung in the air, thick and suffocating, a cruel, heavy weight pressing down on me. It was there, unspoken, but louder than any shout. The humiliation burned my face, hotter than any afternoon sun. It wasn't just a mistake. It was deliberate. It was public, silent, and utterly devastating. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't just an inconvenience. I was an unwanted package, left at the door to be dealt with by strangers. My own son, my own family. There, at the door of that grand hotel, with the laughter of strangers echoing faintly around me, and the manager's pitying gaze on my face, the world I knew collapsed. Every promise, every dream I had held onto for months, shattered into a million tiny, sharp pieces. It wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a complete obliteration of my reality. I realized, with a sickening lurch in my stomach, that betrayal had an address. And I was standing right in front of it, alone. Utterly, terribly alone. There, at the door of that grand hotel, with the laughter of strangers echoing faintly around me, and the manager's pitying gaze on my face, the world I knew collapsed. Every promise, every dream I had held onto for months, shattered into a million tiny, sharp pieces. It wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a complete obliteration of my reality. I realized with a sickening lurch in my stomach that betrayal had an address, and I was standing right in front of it, alone. Utterly, terribly alone. My first impulse, the overwhelming urge that pulsed through every vein, was to simply curl up right there on the cold, polished floor and just cry, to let the tears flow until there were no more left, until the pain was washed away, if such a thing were even possible, to just give in to the crushing weight of it all. But then, as if from nowhere, an image, clear as day, flashed in my mind. It was Arthur, my Arthur, so loving, so calm, so sure. I saw him sitting at our old kitchen table, his steady hand placing that worn leather briefcase in front of me. His face, so kind, so full of gentle wisdom, and his voice, oh, his voice. It came with an overwhelming force, cutting through the haze of my shock and grief, echoing in my head as if he were right there beside me, whispering, "Take care of yourself, Eleanor." That quiet, loving command, it hit me then, a jolt that went deeper than any pain. This was not the time for despair. This was not the time for tears. This was the time for clarity, for seeing things as they truly were, without the blurred lens of my own wishes and hopes. The raw, searing pain that had threatened to consume me began to transform. Slowly, steadily, it changed into something else. something cold, something determined. A calm settled over me, a quiet resolve that I didn't know I still possessed. I wasn't going to give them the pleasure of seeing me destroyed. Not David, not Sarah. They wanted me to crumble. They wanted me to disappear. But I wouldn't. Not now. Not ever. Instead of looking around for a shelter or fumbling for my phone to call a relative to lament my fate, to pour out my sorrow and humiliation, I did something I knew, deep down, they would never expect, something that was entirely out of character for the old Eleanor they thought they knew. I walked out of that grand, indifferent lobby the same way I came in, but this time, my head was a little higher, my steps a little firmer. I stopped at the curb, still clutching my small suitcase. There was a taxi idling not too far away. I walked over, opened the back door, and slid in. With the little money I had left in my pocket, just those few crumpled dollars David had given me, I gave the driver an address I hadn't visited in years. The office of Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson. He was the young lawyer, not much older than David, who was my husband Arthur's trusted godson. Arthur had been so proud of him, following his career as he grew from a bright law student into a sharp, respected attorney. After his father, Arthur's best friend, passed away, Mr. Thompson took over his law business. He had always treated me with immense respect, always calling me Aunt Eleanor with such genuine warmth whenever we'd cross paths at family gatherings or holiday dinners. He was a good man, a kind man, someone Arthur truly trusted. And I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that he was the only person I could turn to now. I arrived at his office, a quiet, stately building downtown. The receptionist looked at me a little strangely, seeing me with my small suitcase trailing behind me, but she let me in. Mr. Thompson was on the phone, but he saw me through his office door, and his face instantly filled with concern. He quickly ended his call and rushed out, his brow furrowed. "Aunt Eleanor, what on earth?" he started, his voice hushed. I just nodded, a small, tight nod. I asked for a glass of water, my throat still dry, still tight with the unspoken emotion. But my voice, to my own surprise, came out firm, steady. I sat down on the comfortable leather chair in front of his desk, and with that same surprisingly firm voice, I told him everything. Every painful, humiliating detail. I didn't cry. Not a single tear escaped. I didn't raise my voice. I merely reported the facts, like a witness, calmly recounting a terrible event. And then, when I had finished, when the silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of my story, I made my request. "Mr. Thompson," I said, looking him straight in the eye, my voice unwavering, "I need that leather briefcase of my husband's, the one he always kept in your safe. I think it's time to open it." I didn't explain why. I didn't have to. I just knew. That yellowed envelope, tucked away in that old briefcase, the one I hadn't opened in 10 years, thinking it was just old papers, contained something vital, something only Arthur could have known. It contained the only key that mattered now, and I was about to use it. That yellowed envelope, tucked away in that old briefcase, the one I hadn't opened in 10 years, thinking it was just old papers, contained something vital. Something only Arthur could have known. It contained the only key that mattered now. and I was about to use it. Mr. Thompson, dear Mr. Thompson, he was so kind. He took the old leather briefcase, handled it with such care, and started to go through the papers inside. While he was absorbed in the documents, his brow furrowed in concentration. I tried calling David's cell phone. My fingers trembled as I dialed the familiar numbers. It rang and rang, a hollow, empty sound. Then, voicemail. His recorded voice, so cheerful, so nonchalant, telling me to leave a message. I hung up. I tried Sarah's number. It rang once, just once. Then it disconnected, a flat, dead silence on the line. I tried again. Nothing. The number was blocked. Blocked. Just like that. The realization hit me like a cold wave. I was erased. Completely. From their lives. The feeling of being so utterly cut off, as if I had never existed to them, was suffocating. It took my breath away. But I took a deep, steadying breath. I looked at Mr. Thompson, still focused on the papers. "Please," I said, my voice quiet, almost a whisper. "Please, don't do anything yet. Not now. I need to understand. I need to know the full extent of what they have done." He nodded, his eyes meeting mine, a silent understanding passing between us. He didn't push. He simply continued to review the papers, a quiet hum of the air conditioning filling the silence. In the following days, the truth, a cruel, relentless truth, came in pieces. Little fragments, sharp and painful. My phone, which had been silent for so long, started to buzz with calls. Not from David or Sarah, of course, never from them, but from other family members, distant cousins, an aunt I hadn't spoken to in years. One call in particular stood out. It was from my niece, Laura. She's always been a sweet girl, a little timid but kind. She called me, her voice tentative, almost apologetic. She had seen things. She felt so sorry for me. She told me she saw photos of David and Sarah on social media. They were everywhere, posted for all the world to see. There was no trip to Europe, no Eiffel Tower, no ancient ruins. They were, in fact, celebrating the purchase of a luxury apartment, a brand new, sparkling place, with huge windows and a view I could only dream of. The pictures showed them laughing, clinking champagne glasses, standing on a wide, sun-drenched balcony. And the photo caption, oh, that caption, it cut deeper than any knife. It read, "Our new beginning, the fruit of much hard work and planning. My money, my $80,000, my sacrifice, my entire home, my history, gone, all of it." It wasn't a trip. It wasn't a family future. It was their planning. My money was the fruit of their hard work. The irony, the sheer audacity of it was sickening. I looked at the little screen, at their smiling faces, and felt a cold fury, a quiet, simmering rage I hadn't known was inside me. The news, like all bad news in families, spread quickly, a wildfire of gossip. Some family members called me with pity in their voices, a soft, sympathetic tone that felt like another insult. Others called with morbid curiosity, asking hushed questions, wanting all the sordid details. I could hear the whispers even when they weren't speaking directly to me. Whispers that I was already senile, that I must have misunderstood what David and Sarah were doing, that David had always been such a good son. They painted me as confused, as old and forgetful, easy to dismiss. They made it sound like I was to blame, that I had misread the situation, as if their betrayal was just a misunderstanding on my part. The loneliness. It had never been so profound. I was utterly alone, judged by my own family, even those who claimed to feel sorry for me, and homeless, cast out, while my son, my own flesh and blood, celebrated his new life, a life built entirely on the ruins of mine, on the dust of my old house, on the very essence of what I had given them. It felt like being stripped bare, exposed to the cold, harsh elements of their indifference. Every phone call, every whisper, every photo I saw was another stab. The pain reached its absolute peak. It was a searing, all-encompassing agony. It felt like I was being crushed under an unbearable weight. But instead of breaking me, instead of reducing me to tears and despair, something shifted. Slowly, undeniably, it began to forge, deep within me, from the ashes of my old life, a strength I didn't even know I possessed. A quiet, unyielding power began to rise. I didn't know what it was, or what I would do with it, but it was there, and it was mine. 2 days later, I returned to the Grandview Resort and Spa. The same grand entrance, the same polished doors, the same scent of expensive flowers in the lobby. But this time, it felt completely different. The knot of dread in my stomach was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady resolve. And I wasn't alone. Mr. Thompson was right there beside me, his presence solid, comforting. He carried a neat black briefcase, nothing like Arthur's old worn one, but just as significant. We walked in, and I felt the eyes of the staff, the same young woman from the reception, the manager. Their expressions shifted from polite indifference to a flicker of recognition, perhaps even surprise, at seeing me back. But I held their gaze, my head held high. I was no longer an unwanted package. I was here with a purpose. By a bitter irony of fate, or perhaps it was just the universe's way of revealing things, we found David and Sarah right there in the lobby. My heart gave a little jolt, but it wasn't fear or sadness. It was a strange mix of anticipation and something cold, something clear. They were standing near the grand staircase, laughing loudly, their voices echoing a little too much in the elegant space. They were showing off the place, pointing out the chandeliers, the marble floors, to a couple of friends. They looked so comfortable, so at home, as if they owned it. The very hotel where they had discarded me. My $80,000, the money from my house, had bought them this false sense of grandeur, this illusion of belonging. The moment David saw me, Sarah, who was just about to tell some charming story, froze. The color drained from her face, leaving her pale, almost ghostly. They had expected me to be gone, vanished, a problem solved and forgotten. The shock was indescribable. Then, as their eyes flickered to Mr. Thompson, standing calm and professional beside me, the shock on their faces shifted. Anger flared in David's eyes, quickly followed by a visible, raw panic. Sarah's lips thinned into a tight, desperate line. "Mom, what are you doing here?" David stammered, his voice a strained whisper, completely lacking its usual confidence. He took a small step forward, then hesitated, looking from me to Mr. Thompson, confusion clouding his features. Sarah just stood there, speechless, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. Before they could invent another elaborate lie, before David could spin another tale about my misunderstanding, Mr. Thompson stepped forward, just slightly, placing himself between them and me. He was calm, professional, his voice clear and resonant, cutting through the stunned silence. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice polite but firm. He didn't raise it, but it carried an undeniable authority. "We are here for a meeting with the administration." He paused, then his gaze, steady and unwavering, settled on David and Sarah. "Ms. Davies," he continued, emphasizing my name, "is the majority owner of this establishment." The silence that followed was heavy, thick, absolutely crushing. It hung in the air, a physical presence. David stared, his jaw slack. Then a nervous, almost hysterical laugh burst from him. It was a jarring sound, a desperate attempt to dismiss the truth. "What do you mean, owner? That's absurd," he blurted out, his voice cracking, looking from Mr. Thompson to me, then back to his friends, whose faces were now a mix of bewilderment and dawning realization. That's impossible. She sold her house. She has no money." That's when Mr. Thompson, with a quiet, deliberate motion, opened his black briefcase. The soft click of the latches seemed to echo in the profound silence. He reached inside and pulled out a document. It was a large, official-looking paper, crisp and precise, bound with a green ribbon. The original deed. It wasn't just a copy. It was the original. My late husband, Arthur. His foresight, his wisdom. He had truly thought of everything. Mr. Thompson explained it, his voice calm, professional, as he presented the document. Arthur, with his quiet brilliance, had been one of the founding partners of this very hotel complex. He'd invested in it years ago, long before it became the Grandview it was today. And slowly, carefully, over the years, he bought out the other shares, one by one, until he became the sole owner. This entire establishment, this grand, luxurious resort and spa, was his. And in his meticulously prepared will, everything, absolutely everything, passed to me, to Eleanor Davies. The hotel where I was humiliated, where I was abandoned like an unwanted parcel, was not just a place of pain. It was my inheritance, my true legacy, the safe haven Arthur had always promised. The new owner, just as the title promised, was me. I stood there, no longer the helpless old woman they thought they'd cast aside, but the rightful owner reclaiming what had always been mine. There were no shouts from me, no triumphant cries of revenge, no angry words, no bitter accusations. Just the truth, clear, undeniable, unforgiving. And I watched as that truth demolished their entire castle of lies, right there, before their very eyes. The silence that followed was all the justice I needed. The truth itself was my sword. There were no shouts, no triumphant declarations, just the truth. And in that heavy, unyielding silence, David and Sarah's faces, already pale, flushed with a deep, consuming shame. They didn't say a word. Not a single sound escaped their lips. They just turned, slowly, as if moving through thick mud, their heads bowed, and walked away, without a glance back, without an apology, without a whisper of an explanation. They simply left, swallowed by the grand doors of the lobby, the very doors through which they had tried to discard me. Shame was indeed their own sentence, and it was enough. That same afternoon, the presidential suite of the hotel, the very best of all the rooms, was prepared for me. Not as a guest, not even as a privileged visitor. It was prepared as my new home. The staff, who just days before had looked at me with that quiet, piercing pity, now treated me with a profound, almost reverent respect. It wasn't just for the money, I knew that. It was for something else. For the dignity, I suppose, for the quiet strength I had managed to exude. Even when my world was crashing down, there was a quiet hum of activity as they brought up my small suitcase, the one paltry reminder of my old life, and gently placed it inside the vast, elegant walk-in closet. The room was immense, with panoramic windows overlooking lush gardens and distant, misty mountains. It felt like walking into a dream, but this time it was my dream, and it was real. My new life, the one Arthur had so carefully planned for me, began serenely. I didn't feel the need to take over that wouldn't have been Arthur's way, and it certainly wasn't mine. My expertise was in fabrics, in the quiet hum of a sewing machine, not in ledgers and guest lists. Mr. Thompson, bless his heart, helped me set up a competent board. Experienced professionals, people he trusted, who understood the ins and outs of running such a grand establishment. They would manage the day-to-day, the finances, the bookings. My role was simply to be here, to exist, to finally breathe. My routine became something I had only ever dreamed of. I woke up each morning to the most breathtaking view of those mountains, shrouded in a soft, ethereal mist. The first thing I did was brew a cup of proper English tea, then take my coffee out onto the balcony, wrapped in a warm shawl, and just watch the sunrise. The air was crisp, clean, filling my lungs with a freshness I hadn't realized I missed so much. I didn't rush. There was nowhere I needed to be, no one I had to impress. Just the quiet beauty of. I asked the groundskeepers if I could have a small garden made near the pool area, just a little patch. They were delighted. I spent hours there, tending to my new rose bushes, just like I used to at home. The soil felt good between my fingers, cool and rich. I started a book club, just for the other elderly guests staying at the hotel. We'd gather in the sunlit conservatory, sharing stories, sometimes from the books we read, sometimes from our own lives. I told them about my seamstress days, about Arthur, about the house, and I listened, truly listened, to their own tales of joy and sorrow and everything in between. It was comforting, this quiet exchange of lives. I didn't feel the need for luxury or ostentation, despite being surrounded by it. My greatest wealth, I realized, was the peace I had finally found. It was a deep, settled peace, like the quiet after a long, difficult storm. It was the security of knowing that I would never again depend on anyone's goodwill or tea. The house I sold, the one David and Sarah had used against me, that house was made of bricks and mortar. It was solid, yes, but it could be taken away. The home I built there, within these grand walls, was made of something far more resilient. It was made of self-respect, of quiet determination, of dignity, and of an unshakable resilience that I hadn't known I possessed. Amidst the ruins of what I thought was my family, I found the foundation for a life that was, truly, wonderfully mine. Amidst the ruins of what I thought was my family, I found the foundation for a life that was, truly, wonderfully mine. And as I sit here now, looking out at the mountains from my balcony, the quiet hum of this grand hotel surrounding me, my mind often wanders back, not to anger, not anymore, but to understanding, to the quiet moments of reflection that pain, truly deep pain, eventually brings. And I find myself thinking of you, of all of us, really. Have you ever felt it? That chilling sensation of being invisible? Right there, in front of the very people who should see you most clearly. Those who should know your heart best. The ones who should recognize your worth, not for what you can give, but for who you are. Oh, it's a peculiar kind of hurt, isn't it? When your value feels reduced to a transaction, to what you can offer, what you can provide, rather than the love or history you share. When you realize that your very being is weighed only by your utility, it's a pain that doesn't leave bruises on the skin. No, it's far deeper than that. It settles in your soul, a heavy, suffocating weight. It aches in a place you didn't even know existed. It makes you question everything, every memory, every kind word, every moment of shared laughter. It makes you doubt the very existence of the love you once believed was so unwavering, so true. You start to wonder, was it always like this? Was I always just a resource, a means to an end? And that doubt, it's insidious. It wraps itself around your heart, squeezing tight. For us, for older folk, this feeling, it can be so common, can't it? The world rushing by, often seeming to forget the quiet wisdom, the vast experiences, the simple presence that years can bring. We're often seen as burdens, as problems, rather than treasures. Our stories, our dignity, our very humanity sometimes get lost in the noise of what's next, what's new. But every life, every person, no matter their age, deserves to be seen, to be respected, to be valued for their essence, not just their capacity to serve or give. My journey through that betrayal, that profound abandonment, taught me this more fiercely than anything else. It tore down my world, yes. It left me standing on the broken fragments of what I thought was true. But it also stripped away the illusions. It forced me to look at what truly matters. Not the house, not the money, not even the family name. If it comes without true connection, it's about the self-respect you carry, the dignity you reclaim, the quiet resilience that resides within you, even when you think you have nothing left. It's about remembering that your worth isn't determined by someone else's perception. or their fleeting needs. It's inherent. It's yours. It always was. And knowing that, feeling that, truly understanding it, that's a peace no one can ever take away. And knowing that, feeling that, truly understanding it, that's a peace no one can ever take away. It's not about winning, you see, not in the way they might think. It's about finding your own ground, your own solid earth, when everything else has shifted. It's about realizing that even when your world seems to crumble, when the very people you trusted betray you, there's an unbreakable core within you. That's where true strength lies. It's a quiet strength, not loud or boastful, but deep, resilient. It's the kind that lets you look back at the difficult moments without bitterness, but with a clear, calm understanding of what they taught you. I often think of Arthur now, especially when I walk through the gardens he once helped envision, or when I sit on my balcony watching the mist rise over the mountains in the early morning. He truly was my rock, my guiding star, and even in his absence, his wisdom continued to protect me. I chat with the guests in my book club, a diverse group of kind souls, each with their own rich tapestry of life experiences. We share laughter, sometimes tears, and always understanding. I tend to my roses by the pool, their petals soft against my fingers, their scent a sweet comfort. Each bloom, each quiet conversation, each peaceful morning sunrise feels like a sacred gift. A gift not because I suddenly have wealth, though I am grateful for the security it brings, but because I have found myself. I have found Eleanor again, the one Arthur always believed in, the one who was a bit lost there for a while, adrift in the sea of others' expectations and demands. And she's stronger, wiser, and certainly more at peace than she's ever been. This peace, it wraps around me like a warm, comforting shawl, woven with threads of resilience and self-acceptance. It tells me that even after the most ferocious storms, the sun will always rise again. It's an inherent truth that has always been mine, waiting to be rediscovered. And knowing this, truly feeling this in every fiber of my being, that's the greatest inheritance of all. It's a freedom, a quiet, profound liberation that no amount of money, no betrayal can ever diminish or take away. And if you're listening to this, if these quiet words have resonated with something deep inside you, if they've touched a chord in your own heart, then perhaps you too are navigating your way towards that quiet strength, that inner peace. Perhaps you too understand the subtle ache of feeling unseen, or the sharp sting of a broken trust. These stories, these real moments of life, my story and so many others, they're meant to connect us, to remind us that we are truly not alone in our struggles, nor in our slow, dignified triumphs. So, if you want to keep receiving real stories like this one, stories that speak to the heart, that offer a quiet comfort and a gentle reminder of our shared